learning with you again. Rabbi Shulman, always a pleasure, especially last minute. And Rabbi Shulman, of course, will be giving, after Yontif, will be giving his weekly share, but his time will change, well, only for Rabbi Shulman. His time will now be at 8 o'clock, because as I'm sure everybody here knows, most people know, Rabbi Shulman made Aliyah this summer after 18 years in St. Louis and is living in Yerushalayim. No, you are living in Yerushalayim. Yeah, living in Yerushalayim. So, but he will be continuing his Tuesday shiur right after Yontif, on picking up on Sefer Yeshua, 8 p.m. Israeli time, 1 p.m. in the East Coast, and 12 p.m. in St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, Rabbi Shulman, Vakasha, water libations, all yours. And you can go an extra 5 minutes if need be, honestly. And then we got that 50-minute break coming up. Okay, Vakasha.
All right, can everybody hear and see me? We're good? All right. So we're going to jump right in. One small correction: we're living in Beit Shemesh, in Ramat Beit Shemesh. So,
I'm sorry. I apologize. Why did I think we were okay? My mistake.
No worries. Olim Yerushalayim. So that's something to strive for. All right, we're going to jump right in. The purpose of the shir and the background behind me tells the story a little bit. Is to talk about water and its role during the Chag. This is a topic which is this year particularly was very dear to me, because so much of the Chag revolves around the theme of water, and particularly the theme of water in connection to Israel. And the story of modern Israel is really, on many levels, connected to the story of water. There's an extraordinary book written by Seth Siegel called Let There Be Water, which is the story of modern Israel and the miracle of how it solved the water crisis in the Middle East, and from there everything else blooms. It's an extraordinary piece, and you're welcome to read it. It's a very easy reading, but it's fascinating. It's sort of in the same genre and the same category as Startup Nation. This particular chiddush of this particular shir I heard from Rabbi Dan. It appears in one of his svarim. And what I really wanted to share with you is the mystery related to the Simchat Bet HaShoeva, the water libation, which is really two components. The mitzvah of replacing the libations of wine with water, which was the mitzvah of Nisach Hamayim in the Mizbeach, on the altar in the temple, and the simcha, the joy that accompanied it, because we talk about Simchat Bet HaShoeva, the joy of the drawing of the water, the celebration around the mitzvah of pouring the water over the Mizbeach was actually in the celebration of the drawing of the water from the Shiloach spring. And so that's in itself a mystery. Here we have a mitzvah, and we're going to talk about the source of the mitzvah, a mitzvah to pour water on the Mizbeach instead of wine. And we celebrate the drawing of the water, which isn't part of the mitzvah at all. So the whole context of this mitzvah is odd, and that's what we're going to explore, both its meaning as well as a little bit of its history. So I appreciate the source page should be in the chat room, in the chat box, so you can take a look. I'm going to share my screen. If you can leave your cameras on, it's helpful to me, because I have two screens. I get to see you in the second screen, so that's always helpful. And one thing I do want to do is spotlight my video, so you can go back to gallery view in the top of the screen, and that way that's a more effective recording. Okay, share my screen, and away we go. Can everybody see the source page? All right, excellent. So we know the mitzvah of Sukkah. There are many mitzvot. There's the Sukkah, there's the Daled Minim, there's the Hakafot that we do every day. There's the Arava, there's the shaking of the lulav, and the Arava. There is the prayer for rain on the last day. All the mitzvot of the Chag, on some level, even the Sukkah itself, on some level, connects us back to the story of water. There's a Gemara that talks about the four species and why they're referred to Arvei Nachal, the willow that grows by the river, by the stream. The etrog is called the Pri Eitz Hadar because it grows by all kinds of. Its water source is multiple types of water. Gadol Rov Mayim. There are many pieces of the story of the four species that are also related to water. But the story is explicitly stated in the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah that says that each Chag has a judgment component. 4 times a year when the world is judged. Pesach, which is the harvest, beginning of the harvest, in the middle of the harvest time, we are judged over grain, Pesach al Tfu'ah. On Shavuot, which is towards the height of the harvest, the Atzeret al Perot Ilan, we are judged over the fruits in the beginning of the fruit season. Rosh Hashanah, humanity is judged, but Rosh Hashanah called Ba'e Olam. Ubechag, which is Sukkot, Nidonin al Hamayim. We are judged over the rainfall for the year, which of course connects us to all of the tefillot of the end of the Chag, Hoshanot and Hoshana Rabbah and the Arava. All of that's connected to this theme that we are judged for water. So water plays an extraordinary role philosophically because it's the beginning of the rainy season. There's a logic to that, but yet the specifics of this mitzvah called Nisach Hamayim, that's going to require some explanation. There's a famous statement of the Shibbolei Leket that says that Hoshana Rabbah, which is called Yom Arava, the day we take the willow, Hu Yom Chatimat Adin. That's the day of the seal of the judgment, like on Yom Kippur. As it says, we're judged for water on this Chag, Shebo Hayu Misaimim Nisuch Hamayim. And he says that's connected to the fact that it's the last day for the water libation, for the mitzvah. They poured water on the mizbeach instead of wine every single day of the mizbeach, or maybe in addition to wine, to the wine. But this was the last day for that mitzvah. What's going on in this mitzvah of pouring the water on the mizbeach, and why that was so significant? To the point that the Mishnah in Sukkah, famously, I'm sure you've heard this, says, Kol mi shelo ra'a simchat beit hashoeva, lo ra'a simcha miyamav. If you didn't see that celebration, not of the pouring of the water, but of the drawing of the water from the spring, you didn't see a celebration. It was so intense, so large, so great, that it dwarfed everything else. And in that same vein, the Gemara in Sukkah continues and asks, what does it mean, Simchat Beit HaShoeva? What is this word, Shoeva, to draw the water? So one interpretation is that it comes from the verse, Ush'aftem mayim b'sason, to draw water in joy. Another interpretation is that it comes from the word Chashuva, an important mitzvah. And a mitzvah that goes all the way back to the 6 days of creation, Sheshit Yemei Breshit. But we're still talking about the drawing of the water, not even the pouring of the water itself. It's like the hachana, the preparation of the mitzvah, is more significant than the mitzvah. What's going on here in this mystery? And that takes us to, and if we look at the way the Mishnah describes how they performed the mitzvah of Nisuch Hamayim, the pouring of the water on the altar, the Mishnah further states, Sluchit shel zahav, that they had a special golden jug, big, large jug, capacity of 3 log, and they would draw the water from the shiloach, and they would all go down to the water spring, and we walked to the tunnel, but they would go down to the water springs, Higil l'shar hamayim, they would go down to the gate where the water was, Taku v'ariu v'taku, and they would blow the shofar, and they would gather, and they would dance, and they would celebrate, and then they would come into the mizbeach, to the mikdash, they would come up to the temple, alav hakevish, would go up the ramp, and there would be shnei sfalim shel kesef, there would be 2 silver jugs, one for the wine, one for the water. Everything was expensive, everything was celebrated. What is this mitzvah, this celebration around the drawing of the water and the pouring of the water? A mitzvah that doesn't even have, it seems, an explicit source in the Torah. We're going to have to find the source. We're going to look for it. We're going to have to dig through coding to find the source of this mitzvah. And yet, in the experience of the Mikdash in Yerushalayim, it was everything. This mitzvah of drawing and pouring the water in the mizbeach. The Gemara is further in Sukkah in discussing, there's an entire chapter related to just this mitzvah of drawing the water. 3 halachot, 2 of which are not our subject for today. The third being the drawing, the water libation, the pouring of the water instead of wine or in addition to wine on the Mizbech. It's part of the Masorah. It's part of the oral Torah. We don't necessarily have a written source for it, but we have a Masorah that goes back to Moshe and Sinai, that this was what they did. That every other time you brought an offering on the Mizbech, and of any sort, there were certain components that accompanied every offering in the Mikdash. One of them was the Nisuch Yayin, the Nesachim, we say in the davening, the Nesach was always of wine, except on Sukkot when it was water. So the famous interpretation of the source, or the famous description of the source for this mitzvah, which I'm sure you've heard, and we're going to talk about briefly before we move into the Tanakh part of our shir, is the Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit, which says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, Ne'emar b'sheni v'niskehem, v'ne'emar b'shishi u'nisacheh, v'ne'emar b'shvi'i k'mishpatav. Let me explain what that means. Each day of Sukkot, there was a series of offerings that were brought in the Beit HaMikdash for the Chag, the Musaf of the, we refer to as the Musaf, right? The Musaf prayer for every Shabbos and Yom Tov is related to or parallels this this offering in the Beit HaMikdash. When describing the offering of Sukkot, the Torah does something unique, which is to separate and differentiate the particular number of animals in one category for each day of the Chag. That's not our subject, but we refer to it famously as the 70 offerings of Sukkot, Shiv'im Parei Chag, corresponding to the 70 nations. It gives Sukkot its kind of universal character. In the description of those, therefore, each day has a separate description, unlike, for example, Pesach, where it says, for the 7 days, this is the offering that you bring. On Sukkot, it spells out on the first day, on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, each day what you brought because they were different. And many verses repeat themselves in that context. I charted it out for you in a moment. There are, however, 3 places where a word that's repeated each one of the 7 days for the Chag. We're not counting Shmini Atzeret for now, just the 7 days of Sukkot. There's one word that seems to change periodically. Instead of, for example, we'll see what it says, V'niska, it says V'niskehem, or Nusacheha, or Kamishpat, changes to Kamishpatam. I'll show you what those words are in a second. But the unique phrase, actually, let me do that first. Let me show you what we're referring to. So this is a chart which gives you a sample, cross-section sample of the way the Torah delineates each day of the Chag of Sukkot. On the 15th day, this is in Bamidbar Chavtet, you can look it up on the Chumash. On the 15th day of the Chag, there's a certain offering that is brought to get, and this is how it breaks down. Parim, par, right, ox, ayil, ram, keves, sheep, and each one of these categories has different numbers per day of the parim. On the first day there was 13, on the second day there was 12, on the third day there was 11, etc., etc., etc. The 6th day you were down to 8, and on the 7th day you were down to 7. You add up all those numbers, you get to 70. That's the famous 70 parei hachag. Elim, the ayil, the ram, there was 2 each day of the Chag without changing. And the keves also, there was 1. Actually, there was 14. It was a year old, and there were 14 of them each day of the Chag. Shmini Atzeret is not in our conversation. That's the heading. That's what was brought each day. And then the Torah describes the accompanying offerings that accompanied every korban. Minchatam, there was always, with every korban that was brought, with every musaf, there was a mincha, there was a meal offering, which included certain kinds of flowers and certain kinds of oil, etc. Again, that's all Sefer Vayikra stuff. And there was an isaron, a certain amount of yayin, of water, and an isaron of yayin, of wine that accompanied each offering. There was an offering for a sin offering. Milvad olat tamid. This is all in addition to the daily offering. Minchata, the mincha of the daily offering. Veniska, and its nisuch, or its wine libation, or its libation. Poured onto the mizbeach. That's day one. Day two, we have exactly the same language. You can compare them. They're almost identical, except when it comes to the mincha and the nesach, the meal offering and the wine offering, it just summarizes it. For the par, for the ayil, for the keves, according to the numbers, kamishpat, and according to the law. And that's what it says every day. The mincha and the niskehem on day 3, according to the numbers, according to their law. Misparam, kamishpat. Day 6, Kimisparam, Bamishpat, and according to the numbers and according to their law. Similar, the language repeats itself by each verse. There are certain, however, in certain words that are consistent, and then there's suddenly a change. So, for example, when it comes to the nesach at the end of the story, the libation, in day 1 it says viniska, it's libation. Day 3 it says viniska, it's libation. On day 4, on day 5, on day 7 it says viniska, it's libation. On day 6 suddenly it says unisacheha, their libations, in a plural. Similarly, on day 2 it said viniskehem, again a way of describing their plural, their libations. And in the description of day 7, it says, according to the numbers, according to its law, kemishpat, like every other day. On day 7, it says kemishpatam, according to their laws. Now, you could argue that the plural here is because there's more than one offering, but the singular form is used every single day, except in 3 instances. V'niskehem, v'nisacher, kimishpatam, and I made the letters larger so that you could see visually what the Gemara concludes, which is the mem, the yud, and the mem, the additional letters, spell out the word mayim, water. Kan remez l'nisuch hamayim min Torah. In this way, there's a hint to this mitzvah of the water libation in addition to the wine on the days of the Chag. And that gives rise to the entire celebration of the water, the pouring of the water, the drawing of the water around Sukkot. Now, this got very technical. It got so technical, I may have lost you. That's okay. You don't have to worry about being lost at this. But you have to admit that this kind of nuance, by and of itself, is not going to give rise to one of the most extraordinary stories of the Second Temple period, which was the mitzvah of drawing the water, pouring the water. Some suggest it's d'Rabbanan, it's rabbinic mitzvah. Some suggest it's d'oraita. It's hinted to in the Torah. It's part of the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's part of the Masoret halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which gives it a biblical mandate. But its source is not in the Torah by text. In the Torah by text, it's only about wine. Suddenly, in this remez, in this hint, there's a reference to water. What is going on? Why is it so significant? I don't even know. I mean, it's in the Gemara, in the description, in the Mishnah, it's so extraordinary, it's so elaborate, and yet there's no explicit reference in Tanakh anywhere to the pouring of the water in the Mizbeach, on the Mizbeach, in the context of the celebration of the mitzvah of Sukkot. There's a hint, remez, but is it totally based on the oral Torah? Is this something? What's going on, and what do we make of this mitzvah? So to put this together, take you into a story in Sefer Malach, which is the only place we find, if I distill the concept, pouring water on the altar as part of the celebration or as part of the mitzvah of the offering. That's the context here. Whatever the offering is, whatever the water is, the context is pouring water on the Mizbeach. We always poured wine in the Mizbeach. Suddenly we poured water. There's only one instance in all of Tanakh where it's explicitly described that they poured water on the Mizbeach. And that is the story of Eliyahu HaNavi on Mount Carmel. Eliyahu, when he gets up to the top of Mount Carmel, and if you were with us in our study of Sefer Yonah, we sort of skipped over this chapter. We spent a lot of time talking about Eliyahu, and you're welcome to review that. But Eliyahu comes to a showdown with the prophets of Baal and a showdown with Achab and Izebel, and he brings all of Israel and all of the leadership and all of the prophets up to the top of Mount Carmel for a final showdown over the idolatry of Achab and Izebel. And there he has this whole taunt with the prophets of Baal. He says, you go first, take your altar and cry out to your gods, and fire should come down from heaven and consume your offering. And nothing happens. And they cry out to their gods, and nothing happens. And Eliyahu taunts them, and he says to them, maybe he's sleeping, cry out later. Then it's Eliyahu's turn. Eliyahu takes 12 stones, like the 12 tribes of Israel. And he builds this altar. And then he does something remarkable. Vayomer, mil'u arba kadim mayim. He says to the people around him, go and take 4 pitchers of water. Vayitzku al ha'olav ve'al ha'itzim. And pour it over the wood and over the altar and over the offering. Now, why would you pour water over the offering and over the wood? Especially if your goal is to light the fire. Water is counterintuitive. You don't want to pour water if your intention is over the wood, if your intention is to light the wood. But of course, for Eliyahu, the goal is to enhance the miracle. And so by pouring water, it enhances the miracle, because water and fire don't usually go together. Vayomer, then he says to them, Shnu, do it again. 4 pitchers of water twice. Vayishnu, vayomer shaleshu, a third time. Vayishaleshu, he does it again. So you understand that there are 12 tribes, 12 stones, and 12 altars, or stones to make up the Mizbeach, and now 12 pitchers of water poured over this altar. So much water was poured over this altar, that the water ran around the side of the altar like a ditch. And he filled the ditch with water. Why this is significant, we're going to process this in a second. And then, as the time came for the offering in the afternoon, and then Eliyahu offers his prayer. Let it be known today that I am your servant, and I have done all of these things in your command. Aneni Hashem aneni. Answer me, God. Phraseology which formulates the core of the Tefillah of Slicha. And let all the people know that you are God on this day. And suddenly, Vatipol Esh Hashem, fire from heaven came down, and it consumed the offering, consumed the wood and the stone, and it just enveloped the stone and the dust. And the fire, literally, fire and water don't mix. If there's more water than fire, water will extinguish the fire. If there's more fire than water, then the fire will evaporate the water. That's what happened. The fire consumed the water. And the people were so shocked, they fell on their faces. And they said, Hashem Elokim, Hashem Elokim. Then Eliyahu turns to Achab and he says, go and now have a meal, and there's water that's going to come and it's going to rain. Why that's so significant? Because it hasn't rained for 3 years. It hasn't rained for 3 years because Eliyahu declared a drought for 3 years to fight the idolatry of Achab. To get to that in a second. And then Achab goes to eat and drink. Eliyahu goes to the top of the mountain and he starts to pray that this should now bring proper rain. 7 times he prays, and in the 7th time, there's a little cloud, and then it gets bigger, and finally, the sky was filled, and the rains came, and the rain ended the drought in the land of Israel. So there's 2 aspects of this story that connect directly to the mitzvah of the water libation of Sukkot. Number 1 is the only instance in Tanakh we find pouring water on the Mizbeach. And that's extraordinary. Number 2, it gives us a little bit of a clue, although we don't know what season this is, but it gives us a clue into what the purpose of the water libation is about. Because immediately after he pours the water on the Mizbeach and the fire comes down, he offers a prayer for the rain to end the drought of the last 3 years. And that's exactly how the Sifrei interprets the mitzvah of the water libation. What is the reason for the pouring of the water on Sukkot? Rabbi Akiva explains, Ne'emar havi omer b'Pesach shenitbarech lechem et hatvua. We bring the omer, the barley offering on Pesach, so that our harvest, early harvest, should be blessed. We bring the bikurim, the first fruits, on Shavuot, so that our fruits should be blessed, as we said at the beginning, 4 times the world is judged. Why do we pour the water? As part of a prayer for rain for the season. This is the beginning of the rain season. Certainly in Israel, when everything is seasonal, rain season starts this time of the year in the fall. That's one aspect of it. But there's a much deeper aspect of this mitzvah, specifically in the context of the story of Eliyahu. Because what's missing in this story is the context, where Eliyahu is standing there on the top of Mount Carmel and he commands the people who are loyal to him to take pitchers of water, 4 pitchers of water, and pour out over the altar, and then to do it a second time, and to do it a third time, 12 pitchers of water, and then to fill the te'alah, to fill the ditch all around the Mizbeach. We need to understand that that was not a simple request. For the last 3 years, literally 3 years, there has been not a drop of rain in the land of Israel. There has not been a drop of rain in the land of Israel for 3 years because Eliyahu himself declared a drought as a way of punishing Achav and Izebel and the idolatry of Baal, and that had so permeated the land. Eliyahu's story begins in the opening verse of chapter 17, the previous parak. Vayomer Eliyahu tishbi mitoshavei Gilad el Achav chai Hashem Elokei Yisrael asher amarti lefanav im yeh hashanim ha'ele talu matar ki'im lefi dvari. I take an oath, says Eliyahu to Achav, that as I stand before God, there shall not be rain in this land except by my command. And for the remainder of those 3 years, until the showdown in chapter 18, the rest of the story focuses on Eliyahu and God trying to show Eliyahu the consequences of what it means to declare a drought in the land of Israel. And so he's forced to go and hide by Nachal Crete, by the river and be fed food by the ravens, because Achav is going to kill him if he sees him. And then he's forced, once the Nachal dries up because there's no rain in the land, then he's forced to run to a house of a widow and her son. And Chazal say she's a widow because her husband died in the drought that Eliyahu declared. And in that drought, he says to her, what do you have to eat? And she says, I have nothing. I have 1 piece of bread left for me and my son before we die. And Eliyahu says, no, you have to feed me, Navi. And there's a, sorry, there's a little bit of water. And you have to feed the Navi. And by miracle, the bread continues and she survives. And then the child dies. And Eliyahu has to bring the child back to life. Well, we talked about this in the context of our study of Sefer Yonah, because Chazal say the child was, in fact, Yonah. And then, but the whole purpose of that experience, the entire chapter, is Eliyahu facing the consequences of this extraordinary drought that he declared. Not a drop of rain has fallen in the land of Israel for 3 years. People are dying of thirst, literally. And finally, at the end of that story, beginning of chapter 18, God comes to Eliyahu and he says to him, Eliyahu, in the 3rd year of the drought. And God says to him, to go and find Achav Have whatever showdown you want with Achav, because I will make it rain today. Meaning God says the drought is over. People have suffered enough. Okay, so Eliyahu brings all of the prophets of Baal to the top of Mount Carmel in order to have a showdown with them so that he can show them that loyalty to God is what brings the rain at the end of the day. But if we put ourselves back into that moment, I want to take us back to the beginning of Eliyahu on the top of Mount Carmel. And he says to the people, take 4 pitchers of water and pour it over the altar and pour it over the wood and fill the ditch with water. And now repeat that a second time and a third time. If you were standing there, if you were a member of the Jewish people and you were standing there, and this is the showdown between Eliyahu and Achav, for 3 years it hasn't rained a drop. And now, where did they get this water from? They brought it up with them from the bottom of the mountain. They climbed all the way up to the top of the Mount Carmel. That's a lot of climbing. You take water when you're going to Tiyul. They took whatever water they had left. And the last bit of water they had left was in these pitchers. And Eliyahu turns to the people and he says to them, take your last bit of water and pour it over the Mizbeach. And the people standing there, the widow and her son and everybody else who are dying of thirst for the last 3 years, are watching the last drops of water that exist in the land of Israel that they can drink poured over the altar. If Eliyahu fails, it's a death sentence. It's the last water they have. And they poured it over the Mizbeach. And they did it again. And they did it a third time. And then Eliyahu offers his prayer. What's his prayer? And he says to God, he says, let it be known that I did all this in your name and that Aneni Hashem Aneni. Why is that prayer so important? Because what he's really saying is, this is it. It's his choice between us and the idolatry of Baal. Baal was a fertility god. Baal was a god of rain. And this was the showdown. And Eliyahu put everything into this moment. And the demonstration wasn't the fire from heaven. The demonstration of loyalty, of emunah, was the willingness of the people to pour the water on the Mizbeach. There's no guarantee it's going to rain. It only rains afterwards. If Eliyahu fails, they're done. I was going to say they're toast, but that was too bad a pun. Right? If Eliyahu fails, they're done. And yet they take the water, they pour it a second time and a third time, and they demonstrate their loyalty to Eliyahu and to God, Hashem Elohim, willing to literally sacrifice the last bit of water they have in the hope and the prayer and the trust that if they do what is right, God will bring the rain. And that's what happens. That's what happens. Water is the key to everything in the land of Israel. It's psukim and Devarim that talk about the uniqueness of the land of Israel. The land you're going into as your inheritance. It's not like the land of Egypt where you left, where because of the Nile you could plant your seed and you could water your grass and you could water your garden, and everything was easy because the Nile never dried out. But the land you are going to, Eretz Havimuv Kaot, is a land of hills and valleys. Limtar hashamayim tishtamai. It drinks water from the rain of the sky, which means that you have to look up to the heaven to bring that rain. And without it, you will literally die. Eretz asher Hashem Elokecha doreshet tamid. It's the land that God cares for, the land that God watches over from the beginning of the year to the end of the cycle. This is a land in which without the rain is the key to. That's why the whole story of the fast days and Masechet Ta'anit is about what happens if it doesn't rain. Water is the key to survival in this land. Hence the story of, hence my background picture, which is the story of the Hula Valley and the remarkable miracle of the recreation of the greenness of Israel in modern Israel. The story of what I referred to at the beginning, the let there be water, the story of the miracle of modern Israel and its engagement with the problem of water in this region. There's a famous story in Sefer Shmuel where David Melech is fighting with his troops, fighting in the middle of the fields, and he's dying of thirst. Oh, I remember there in Bethlehem there was a well. I'm just thirsty, and 3 of his soldiers go and risk their lives to bring him water. To David Melech, that water is so precious because the soldiers risked their lives to bring it to him. He refused to drink it because it was like holy water. He poured it out to God. He made a libation out of it, Nisuch Mayim. It was a korban, but a korban not of an animal, but a korban of water, because to him this was kadosh. This is the context of the mitzvah of Nisuch Mayim. When we come to the Mizbeach on Sukkot, we're praying for rain. Every part of the mitzvah, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Every part of the mitzvah of the day was about rain. The Daled Minim, sitting in the sukkah, the arava, the hakafot, everything is about rain. Mishnah says we should really be praying for rain on the first day of Sukkot, but then we can't sit in the sukkah, so we pray for rain on the last day of the holiday. But it's really all a prayer for rain. And then we go to the Mizbeach. And remember when Sukkot falls, you've been to Israel, you've walked through the Shilach in the beginning of the season, and walked through the Shilach tunnels at the end of the season, right? The water is down to your toes instead of to your waist. The waters are dried up. The cisterns have dried up. It's the end of the water season. If it doesn't rain, people will die. And at that moment, the very end of the summer, to take water, whatever's left in the Gihon Springs, and bring it to the altar, as if to say, we're not just bringing Parei Chag, and not just bringing a korban chatas and a keves and an olav. We're not just bringing korbanot. We're bringing our souls. We're pouring the water onto the Mizbeach as part of the Avodah, as if to say, now God, make it rain. We are repeating exactly what Eliyahu did in Har Carmel. And therefore, the celebration, I believe, is not around the pouring of the water. It's around the effort to go to the Gihon and bring that last bit of water up to the Mizbeach, the shoeva, the drawing of the water, which demonstrated that they literally danced their way to celebrate, to show that this mitzvah was to them everything. It symbolized the deep emunah, the faith, the trust they had to pour the water on the Mizbeach as part of a prayer that this year should be a year blessed with rain. And blessed with rain and blessed with life and sustenance and everything that came with it. So that's our prayer. That's our tefillah. When we celebrate Sukkot, everything we celebrate, it should be a year of rain, a year of celebration, a year of peace, a year of success, financially, communally, nationally. But the water symbolized that effort, that sacrifice, like Eliyahu and Har Carmel, like the people in Har Carmel, to take the water and pour it over the Mizbeach as a demonstration that this was their expression of Mesiwut Nefesh, literally, the commitment of their souls. They put their lives on the line for the sake of the integrity and for the sake of the success of the Jewish people. I will stop here. I took advantage of Rabbi Kalman of that extra 5 minutes, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Quickly, 1 minute for questions. Anybody, comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll take our break. Okay,
Right.
see, that's it. Your extra 5 minutes answered all the questions there are. Okay.
Excellent share as usual. Thank
Okay,
Thank you very
Rabbi
much.
Shulman will be back
And,
after Yontif, and enjoy and hear good things. And thank you very much. And Navit Sadiq, we will start in We'll start at 11:33. Okay, we're going to cut the break short by a couple minutes, so we'll have a 12-minute break. Okay, if that's okay, and we're going to welcome Navid, who runs the online Beit Midrash at Nishmat, teaching that. I'll introduce her a little bit more. She's making her debut for Torah in Motion, so we're looking forward to hearing her. And I think the most impressive thing is the mother of 11 children. That's the part of her bio that I was most impressed, and obviously is the most important part of her bio. I think we will all agree. Okay, we'll see you all in 12 minutes, and okay, go get a stretch, a cup of coffee, and invite a friend. Everybody, that's your job now. Everybody go invite one friend to join us for the second half of our program. Navi, Benny Gesundheit, and Gila Fine will round out the afternoon of the third of our Yemei Yun. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.